He said I ruined his life while wearing the sweater I hand-knitted on our honeymoon. It was a Thursday. I remember because I always make lasagna on Thursdays, the way he likes it, with extra cheese and no onions. He barely touched it, just pushed the food around like it offended him. I thought he might be tired, or maybe upset about the neighbor's dog barking again. I didn't expect what came next. He didn't look at me when he said it, just kept his eyes on the half-eaten plate and mumbled, "I wish I had married someone else." I blinked, laughed even, thought it was one of his dry jokes. But then he looked up, and I saw it, that look you can't unsee, that cold, flat honesty that strips the world bare. He said it again, slower this time. "I regret marrying you." My hands trembled, not from age, but from the shock. 40 years. 40. I gave up jobs, friendships, even children. Yes, children, for this marriage. I stood by him when he lost his father, when he drank too much, when he locked himself in his office for days during those dark years. I loved him through all of it, through everything. He said I was dull, predictable, like wallpaper. He muttered, "Always there, always the same." I looked down at the fork in my hand and wondered what 40 years of loyalty buys you. Apparently, not much. I didn't speak. I didn't trust my voice. I just stood up, cleared the dishes, and went upstairs. My knees ached, but my heart ached more. I didn't cry, not yet. I was too stunned, too busy trying to remember if there was ever a moment where I'd seen this coming. That night, I sat on the edge of the guest bed, the one we never used, the one I'd joked we'd save for grandkids. I opened the drawer where I kept my old journals, the ones I started writing when I was 19 and still believed in forever. I flipped through them like looking through someone else's life. I wrote him a note, a single sentence. "You should know who I've been all these years," and I left the diary open on his pillow. The next morning, I found him in the kitchen. Red eyes, that sweater I made him 20 years ago slumped around his shoulders. He didn't speak at first, just looked at me like I was a ghost. Then he whispered, "I didn't know you were lonely, but I wasn't lonely. I was invisible, and that's worse." We met in 1982, at a library in Ohio. I was shelving books. He was looking for something on European architecture, or pretending to, just to talk to me. He wore a corduroy jacket and had the kind of smile that made you forget what you were doing. I remember thinking, this man is going to change my life. I just didn't know how much. We married 2 years later, in a courthouse with 3 friends, and my sister holding a bouquet from the grocery store. We didn't have much, just each other, and a dream we barely knew how to name. We moved into a 1-bedroom apartment with brown carpet and a leaky sink. He promised we'd build more. I believed him. He was ambitious, intense, always talking about the future. I was softer. I liked quiet things. I liked us. He wanted a house, a reputation. I wanted connection. We compromised, or I did. I got a job at a dental office, steady pay, health insurance. He pursued a master's degree in urban planning. I wanted children. He didn't. Said he couldn't see himself as a father. I mourned that quietly. Told myself love was about sacrifice. That fulfillment comes in different shapes. I never brought it up again. We moved from city to city over the years, chasing promotions, chasing dreams, chasing something I don't think he ever caught. I followed, packed boxes, made each new house feel like home, painted the walls, sewed curtains, learned neighbors' names. He'd disappear into work, sometimes for days. I filled the silence with lists and loyalty. He was never cruel, just absent. Absent in ways that don't show up in photographs. At parties, we were the charming couple. He'd wrap an arm around me, laugh too loud, refill my glass without asking. But in private, the space between us was an ocean. I stopped asking him to swim. I learned how to disappear without leaving, how to smile during dinner, how to nod during lectures, how to love a man who didn't look back at me anymore. My diary became my real husband, the one who listened. Our routines were etched in stone. I made breakfast every morning, folded his shirts the way he liked. We watched Jeopardy at 7. He kissed me on the cheek before bed. We hadn't made love in years, but that kind of silence becomes wallpaper. You stop noticing it. There were moments, though, quiet gestures, him rubbing my feet after long days, leaving the last bite of pie for me, holding my hand at funerals. I clung to those. I made them enough. I thought maybe this was just how marriage aged. That emptiness was normal, that tenderness fades, and companionship is all that's left. But deep down, I ached. Not for passion, for recognition, for someone to see me. I started writing again. Not poetry, not stories, just fragments of thought, sentences I couldn't say out loud. I miss feeling chosen. I don't know who I am when he's not looking. Does he love the life we have, or just the version of himself it lets him maintain? He never asked to read them, never noticed the notebooks, until the night he broke me with a sentence, and I broke our silence with the truth of my pages. It didn't happen all at once. The distance between us stretched slowly, like thread unraveling from a sweater, the same sweater he wore that night. At first, it was small things. He stopped asking me about my day. I'd say something funny or tender, and he'd barely glance up from his crossword. He was there, but he wasn't with me. He began to eat dinner in silence, not angry, just uninterested. I'd ask, "Do you like the chicken?" And he'd say, "It's fine." He used to rave about my cooking, used to tell everyone I made restaurant-level meals. Now it was just food, just another item on the plate, just like I had become. We stopped watching our shows together. I'd be in the living room, waiting for the familiar click of the TV turning on, but he stayed in the office. Hours passed. Sometimes I'd peek in, and he'd be staring at the screen, not working, not reading, just sitting there, like something inside him had gone offline. He began sleeping in later, walking past me in the mornings without a word. I'd pour his coffee, place it beside his paper, and he'd grunt. No thank you, no kiss. It felt like living with a ghost who still made noise. A man I married who had forgotten I was part of the equation. I tried to bring him back. I started. Dressing again in the mornings. Lipstick, perfume, even earrings. He didn't notice. I asked him once, "Do I look nice today?" He looked at me blankly. "You always look nice." But it didn't sound like a compliment. It sounded like routine. There was one night, maybe 3 months before everything broke, when I sat across from him during dinner and asked, "Are you happy?" He looked surprised, as if happiness wasn't part of the deal anymore. "What kind of question is that?" he said. Then he got up and left the table. I started keeping track. Not of his faults, but of the silence. A full week without a real conversation. 14 days without any touch. A month without laughter. It felt like being erased, one layer at a time, like someone slowly fading your photograph with a wet cloth. Noticed how he'd light up around others. At dinner parties or neighborhood events, he'd laugh, joke, even flirt. People said, "You two are such a sweet couple." I smiled. He didn't even squeeze my hand under the table anymore. He just sipped his wine and talked about city council proposals. He snapped at me once over something small, a misplaced bill. His tone cut through me like ice. "Do you even know what you're doing anymore?" I said nothing, but I felt it. The shift. He no longer saw me as his partner, just someone who lived next to him, a roommate with too many feelings. There was a woman from the HOA board he started spending time with. I noticed her name come up often. Jill said this. Jill suggested that. I'm not saying he cheated, but I noticed how he smiled when he said her name, the kind of smile I hadn't seen directed at me in years. One evening I overheard him on the phone. I walked in quietly, and he didn't notice. He was laughing. "She doesn't even notice when I'm gone," he said. I left the room before I heard the rest. I didn't want to know who he meant by she. I already knew. He stopped wearing the watch I gave him for our anniversary. He used to wear it every day. He said it made him feel like someone who mattered. Now it sat in the drawer with other forgotten things, like our wedding photo, like my voice. I told myself he was going through something, that men his age get strange, that maybe he was scared of mortality, of change, of something I couldn't see. But deep down, I knew what it was. He had stopped seeing me, and worse, he had started to resent me for still being there. The night he said it, the house felt colder than usual. Not physically, the thermostat read 72, but in that way where warmth has nothing to do with heat. I had just finished folding laundry, his favorite navy socks, a button-down I still ironed every week, even though he barely wore it anymore. I walked into the dining room, set down 2 plates, and called his name. He didn't answer right away. When he came down, he didn't say hello, just sat, picked up his fork, chewed. Watched him for a moment, the way he stared past me toward the window, as if there was something more interesting in the darkness outside than at this table. Then with me, I tried, again. I asked, "Do you remember our trip to Boston? The one with the snowstorm?" I was smiling. I wanted to connect. He didn't even lift his eyes, just muttered, "Barely." Something in me flinched. That's when I asked, softly, cautiously, "Do you ever think about us? About where we started?" He put his fork down and sighed like I had burdened him, like I was the interruption to a perfectly good evening. "Honestly," he said, "I try not to." I stared at him. I needed to believe he was joking, that this was just one of his cold spells, but then he said it. "I regret marrying you," just like that. The words didn't shout. They didn't storm. They landed in the room like dust, quiet, inescapable, choking. I felt the air change. My vision blurred, but not from tears, from disbelief. I had loved this man. I had stayed, chosen him, forgiven him, over and over again. And he regretted me? I couldn't speak. I stood, walked to the sink. My fingers gripped the counter. I wanted to scream, throw something, demand an explanation, but all I did was whisper, "Why?" He shrugged. "I don't know. I guess I thought life would feel fuller. You were just safe, stable, predictable. You were always there." I turned. My voice came out small, shaky. "That's not love. That's utility." He looked away. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the guest room, surrounded by the silence of someone who realized her entire adult life had been built beside a man who never truly cherished her. I pulled out my old diary, the one I hadn't touched in years, the leather leather cover was worn, corners frayed. Inside, I had written everything he never asked about. I miss being someone's reason. I feel like furniture. I'm tired of begging with gestures. I flipped to a blank page and wrote something new. Just one line. He regrets me, but I don't regret the love I gave. Then I left it open on his pillow. The next morning, I found him there, the diary still in his lap. Tears in his eyes, hands shaking. He looked at me like I was someone else, or maybe like he was seeing me for the first time. I didn't know, he whispered. I didn't know you were this, alone. I said nothing, because the answer wasn't new. It had just never been heard. After that night, I didn't scream. I didn't pack bags in a frenzy or slam doors like in the movies. No, I became quiet. Intentionally, deliberately quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't ask to be noticed, but makes its absence felt in everything. I stopped making his coffee, not out of spite, out of clarity. He could brew his own now. I still made mine. Cinnamon, almond milk, the way I liked but always skipped because he preferred it plain. I sat by the window and sipped slowly, like I had nowhere to be. For once, I didn't. I moved into the guest room. No dramatic conversation, no demand for space. I simply folded my pillow, carried my journal, and closed the door. When he asked, "Why?" I said, "Because I don't want to sleep beside someone who regrets me." He didn't reply. I started walking every morning, just after sunrise. No destination, no music, just the sound of my shoes on pavement and the rhythm of my breath. For 30 minutes a day, I belonged only to myself. That was new. That was sacred. Stopped waiting for him to notice things. The way I curled my hair again. The way I wore my mother's earrings. The scent I used to spray just for him. I wore them for me now. Not because I was trying to be wanted, but because I remembered how it felt to want myself. He tried to soften eventually. Said good morning again. Tried to talk about the news, the yard, the weather. But I gave him only what he gave me for years. Politeness without intimacy. Presence without connection. It wasn't revenge. It was a mirror. I didn't tell anyone, right away. Not even my sister. This part of me needed to stay untouched, unspoken. Grief is a delicate thing, and when it's for a living person, it's even more confusing. So I stayed silent, with grace. One afternoon, I found him rereading my diary. Not just the last page, all of it. He didn't see me at first. His hands trembled as he turned the pages. When he finally looked up, he said, "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I smiled softly. "I did. You just weren't listening." He asked if I wanted to fix things. I said I didn't know. And that was the most honest thing I'd said to him in years. I stopped cooking dinner for 2. I made soup, just for me. I read while I ate, candle lit, jazz playing. I started liking the quiet. He apologized once, a real apology. No but, no if, just, "I'm sorry for not seeing you." I nodded. I didn't cry. I just whispered, "It's too late for sorry, but not too late for truth." The day I took off my wedding ring, I didn't feel sorrow. I felt light, like I'd finally removed something that had been weighing me down. Not him, the illusion. I didn't leave the house. I didn't ask him to, but he started staying, out longer, sleeping in his office. I think he knew. The separation had already begun, silently, powerfully. And when people asked how we were, I smiled and said, "We're redefining things." Because I didn't owe anyone pain, only peace. I didn't explode. I didn't collapse. I just changed my shape. And he watched, wordless, as the woman he forgot to cherish stopped looking back. The first thing I reclaimed was my time. I used to fill it with tasks, errands, things that made me feel useful or needed. Now I gave myself slow mornings. I stayed in pajamas longer. I read on the porch, books I'd bought years ago but never touched because there was always laundry to fold, bills to pay, silence to manage. I signed up for a watercolor class at the community center. The teacher was a retired nurse named Helen, who said, "You're not too old to start. You're exactly on time." I nearly cried at that. Not because it was profound, but because it had been so long since someone spoke to me like I still had a future. I painted every morning for a month, not because I was good, I wasn't, but because I liked the way the brush moved across paper, like I was creating softness in a life that had gone too sharp. I went to therapy, alone. I told the woman everything. How I stayed because I thought loyalty was the highest form of love. How I lost pieces of myself so slowly I didn't even notice they were gone. How I thought silence was strength. She didn't tell me to leave. She told me to listen, to myself. My sister noticed the change first. "You're glowing," she said. I laughed. "It's moisturizer and sleep." But the truth was, it was peace. The kind that doesn't come from anyone else's approval, just your own presence. I rearranged the living room, hung up new curtains, put away old photos that made me feel like I was pretending. I didn't throw them out. just stored them somewhere safe, like a past life I'd finally outgrown. I started writing again, not in a journal, not secrets, just thoughts, essays, reflections. A woman from the class asked if I'd share something in the community newsletter. I said yes. The piece was titled, "Things I've Learned at 62 That I Wish I Knew at 22. I wrote lines like, "You can survive the loss of someone still sitting across the table from you," and "Being chosen means nothing if it requires you to vanish." They printed it. People stopped me in the store, at the post office. "I felt every word," one woman said, and I thought, maybe my story matters. I made new friends, women who had been through divorce, widowhood, reinvention. We drank wine in backyards, shared books, swapped playlists. One of them taught me how to make risotto. Another took me to a yoga class. I laughed so hard once I fell off the mat. The kids, my godchildren, my nieces, started visiting more. I baked again. Not because he liked it, because I did. Chocolate chip cookies, warm from the oven. I'd eat 2 before anyone else arrived. That was my little rebellion. One day, I looked in the mirror and realized I liked who I saw. The fine lines, the silver strands, the softness in my eyes. They weren't signs of age. They were evidence that I lived, that I endured, that I chose myself. And when I heard our wedding song playing in a store one afternoon, I didn't freeze. I smiled. Not because I missed what we had, but because I finally knew I deserved more than just being someone's comfort zone. I was never the wallpaper. I was the house. It happened on a Sunday, the kind where the sun is gentle and the air feels like forgiveness. I was at the local farmer's market, carrying a basket of fresh herbs and sourdough, chatting with a vendor about honey. That's when I saw him, across the crowd, browsing alone, older, slower, smaller. He didn't see me at first. He was wearing the same corduroy jacket from our early years, frayed now, elbows thinning. For a moment I felt a pang, not of love, of recognition. He used to be the whole center of my world. Now he was just someone I used to live beside. When he did look up and saw me, his expression flickered, surprise, then something else, maybe regret. He walked toward me with hesitation, not the confident stride I remembered. This was a man who knew he'd lost something and didn't expect to get it back. "Hi," he said, voice soft. "You look well." I smiled. "I am." I didn't ask how he was, not out of cruelty, out of clarity. I didn't need his story to validate mine anymore. He looked down, then back at me. "I read every page," he said, twice. He was talking about my diary. I didn't realize how blind I'd been. I nodded. "You didn't want to realize it then." He flinched a little but didn't deny it. "I keep thinking about that line you wrote, about not being lonely, just invisible." He paused. "I see you now." It was meant to comfort me, but all it did was confirm what I'd always feared. It took me walking away for him to finally open his eyes. I tilted my head. That's the thing about vision. Sometimes it only comes after the damage is done. We stood there in silence, surrounded by life and laughter, the sound of children, the scent of lavender, the chatter of women choosing strawberries. And for the first time, I didn't feel tethered to him. I didn't feel broken. "I miss you," he said quietly. "I miss us." I stepped back gently. "You miss the version of me who didn't ask for more. That version's gone, and she's not coming back." He blinked fast. I think he wanted to say something else, but there was nothing left to say. Friend of mine, Cheryl from watercolor class, waved at me from the bakery stand. "Coming?" she called. I raised a hand. "Right behind you." I looked at him one last time. "Take care of yourself," I said, and I meant it, because I no longer needed to carry his care. I had enough in my basket already. I walked away. He didn't follow. That was the last time I saw him. Sometimes, the most powerful revenge isn't anger or success. It's peace. It's the freedom of walking through the same town where your heart once broke and realizing he's the one standing still. They say grief comes in waves, but no one tells you that so does clarity. One day, you wake up and realize the person you once waited for is no longer the person you'd even want to sit beside. That's not bitterness. That's healing, I thought. Letting go would feel like failure, but it didn't. It felt like standing in sunlight after years of dim rooms, like stretching muscles that had long forgotten what ease felt like remembering your own name after answering to someone else's silence for too long. I used to replay the early years in my mind, like maybe if I looked hard enough, I'd find the moment he stopped choosing me. But now I know it wasn't one moment. It was thousands. Small, silent choices, missed glances, unspoken dismissals. I was there. He just stopped showing up. And now, I no longer look for him in crowds. I no longer wait for apologies that arrive too late. I no longer try to be palatable, quiet, or low maintenance. I am not wallpaper. I am the whole wall, and I stand tall. My life is simple now, joyful in quiet ways. Morning walks, watercolor pages, the laughter of friends who know me by heart. I fill my shelves with books I choose, my home with music, like my days with people who reflect, not drain, the light in me. Sometimes I get asked if I'm single, and I smile. smile, because I'm not waiting. I'm whole. If love comes again, it'll be a bonus, not a rescue. I don't hate him. I don't wish him harm, but I no longer soften my story to protect his image. What he regrets is losing control. What I reclaimed was my voice. He once said I ruined his life, but the truth is, he was the storm. I was the shelter, and now I've found the sky.